Hi, everybody. So we made a few points about the eastern part of the empire, Byzantine. I emphasized how important it is for the preservation of Roman culture and Roman civilization. And I also emphasized how the split between the eastern and western part of the empire really became complete. So we are going to talk a little bit about the Western Empire, and I ask you to do readings that have to do with this topic for today. Um, well, the Byzantine Empire continues to see itself as the Roman Empire. The western part of the empire falls apart. The kings that rule there, the Germanic kings that rule there, are just too weak. They don't have the power, they don't have the means to establish a centralized government. Unlike, of course, what happens in Byzantine, as you know, and you've done some reading specifically on Justinian, so you know how autocratic his rule really was. But this is not the case in the western part, and not a lot of centralization, not a lot of law and order is happening there during the early Middle Ages. So the question is, where does Western Europe come from? How did the western part of the empire become so important? And there are two parts to this answer, to the answer to this question. The first part is the Western Empire survives and becomes important because of the papacy. The papacy has a very important role in the preservation and the survival of the western part of the empire, and you will do some reading about it, some readings about it later on in this summer session. But the second part of the answer is that it survives because of one specific Germanic tribe, and this is the Franks. And there is one person that is especially important in the Frankish tribe, and this is Charles the Great, or Charlemagne. And this is where the term the Carolingian Empire comes from. And I'm not going to give you any details here because you have plenty of details, plenty of information, good information in your textbook about Charlemagne and his importance, and also the importance of the Renaissance that he promotes and establishes in the 8th century. As you know, eventually he becomes an emperor. He's no longer merely king of the Germans, but also emperor, the Roman Catholic emperor. So once again, in the early 9th century, we have an emperor in the West, in the western part of the empire. So this is a highly significant event in European history. Eventually, as you also have read, the western part of the empire, the Carolingian Empire, falls apart. And there are two main reasons for that. The first reason is decentralization. Once the borders in the western part of the empire are fixed, once there are no more lands that the Carolingian nobility can conquer, there is actually no reason to follow one centralized king, one centralized government. The aristocrats, the Carolingian aristocrats, actually put roots in their own territories, and they gather the followers and they try to establish their own power, their own authority, because they really have nothing to gain from listening to a centralized ruler anymore and following the emperor. So this is the first reason. There is no more land to conquer, so the nobility is kind of trying to maintain its own power, to establish its own authority. So the emperor loses ground, loses power. The second reason is that the Carolingians had to deal with new invasions. So if the Roman Empire in the 3rd century had to deal with the invasions by the Germanic tribes, and eventually this is why the western part of the empire, why the Roman Empire disintegrated into two parts, the western and the eastern part, what happens to the Carolingians, a Germanic tribe, is that now they in turn have to deal with new invasions. And the invasions are by three groups. Invasions by the Muslims, invasions by the Vikings, and invasions by the Magyars. And you've read about it in the textbook. So these invasions really weakened the Carolingian Empire, and this is the reason why it ultimately falls apart. The good news for Western Europe is that these are really the last invasions by outside forces that Western Europe is going to have to deal with. So these are the things that I want you to kind of remember as you're doing the readings on the western part of the empire. Talk to you later.